We're live.
Great. Morning, everybody. Shana Tova. It's lovely to see everybody on this bright, beautiful morning. I'm going to be leading you through a bit of study for the next half an hour, and then at about 10:30, we're going to be having a meditative service, which is going to be streamed through this service as well. So we've got half an hour to learn together, and the approach I'm going to take is I'm going to take us through some of the sources that deal with the word hineni in the Bible. And the reason why we're doing that is because in our shofar service, in our Musaf service later on this morning, which Rabbi Pete Tobias has brilliantly pulled together, just a wonderful service for us. One of the recurring themes of the service is going to be the word ayeka. And ayeka is, of course, means where are you? And we're going to start, it's going to be our starting point for our learning, because where does this term ayeka come from? And then how am I going to connect it to hineni? So I'm going to just share a source text, which hopefully everybody can see. If you can't see, then you can chime in and let me know. Maybe you can raise your hand. So where do we first hear the word ayeka, or the principal source for hearing ayeka is in the Garden of Eden. So in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve have committed the sin by eating the fruit of the tree, and they've gone to hide themselves. They hear the sound of the Lord God, this is the Sepharia translation, the eternal God, moving about in the garden, excuse me, at the breezy time of the day. And the man and his wife hid from the eternal God among the trees of the garden. And the eternal God called out to the man and said to him, ayeka, where are you? Now, this raises a really challenging question for us, I think, about what does it mean that God has to ask where we are? How do we understand what it means for God to say, where are you, when we imagine that God knows exactly where we are? Is it a rhetorical device? Is it God asking a question knowing, or as a test to see how the human beings who've been created react? This is a challenge within the text that sits with us as we read the story of the Garden of Eden. And of course, the man replies and says, I heard you wandering in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And then God asks, who told you to eat of the forbidden tree? Who told you that you were naked? Did you eat of the tree from that which I had forbidden you to eat? And then this is the first case of the misogynist response, which is, I didn't do anything wrong. The woman you put at my side gave me of the tree, and I ate. And then the woman, of course, Eve also then says, it wasn't me, Gav, it was the serpent that duped me, and I ate. So ayeka begins the process of conversation between God and the first human beings in this biblical narrative. And the response by Adam and Eve is, of course, not one to take responsibility, but quite the opposite. The response is, it was nothing that I did wrong. I was forced to do wrong by that person. And then when that person's spoken to, that they say, well, it wasn't me, it was the serpent. I had no responsibility. So ayeka becomes a word that tells us something about the relationship between the first human beings and God, about how to respond to the call of God when we're called, where are you? I'm going to pause there and just see if anyone wants to make any comments or questions before I take us to our next text. I think it's going to be a bit hard for me to see whether anybody wants to ask anything, because you can't unmute yourselves, but maybe you can raise your hands. Let me see if I can find the participant list. Okay, I can't see any hands raised. So I'm going to take us on to the next source. And the next source, just before we get to the hineni, is from Genesis chapter 4. And Genesis chapter 4 is, of course, the famous story of Cain and Abel. Cain said to his brother Abel, Cain el hevel achiv, vayehi behi yotam basadeh. So we hear this, the ellipsis is actually in the translation always, because we hear Cain said to his brother Abel, ... What did he say? Vayehi, and it came to pass that whilst they were in the field, that Cain rose up and killed his brother. Abel. And now, what was it that led to the murder? We don't know. We'll put that to one side. We'll reflect on that another time. But then God says to Cain, Vayomer Adonai el Cain, E hevel achicha. God says to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And of course, we then get the also famous response, Vayomer, he says, Lo yadati, hashomer achi anochi. I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And then God says, Vayomer me'asita kol damei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama. What have you done, God says? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now notice, the first two occasions when God calls to a person in the book of Genesis, the response that's given, first time with Adam and Eve, Ayeka, where are you? What have you done? I didn't do anything. I just happened to eat the fruit. It was, put in my hand and then put it in my mouth. And then the second time God calls out and says, what's going on? The response is, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? So the question that gets posed at the beginning of Genesis, I'm going to claim as we're going through here, is that when God calls out to these first human beings, the response is one of irresponsibility, or the one of shirking, or the one of trying to hide or escape from one's responsibility, rather than stepping up and saying, okay, there's a problem here, or I am here in relationship to God, in response to God's call. So that sets up our framing for the response of Hineni. So, anyone got a hand to raise at this time before I carry on? Okay, so Hineni. When do we first hear the word Hineni in the entire Tanakh? The first time, we're going to hear it later in our Torah reading. The first time is Genesis 22, Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. We hear, Vayehi achar hadavarim ha'eleh, v'ha'elohim nisa et Avraham v'yomer elav, Avraham v'yomer hineni. Sometime after what we don't know, after those things, God puts Abraham to the test. God tested Abraham, and he says to him, Avraham. And Abraham's response is, Hineni, here I am. Now, this then characterizes the relationship of Abraham to God in a very real sense. That what does it mean when God is calling you to take responsibility? When you're Abraham, you respond Hineni. When God calls out to Adam and Eve, Ayeka, where are you? Not even knowing, not even calling them by name, their response is, I don't want to have to be put in this position. But with Abraham, who becomes this formative figure of the unfolding religion, the response is Hineni, here I am. And we're going to hear it multiple times, and then we'll come back to the challenge of the multiple occasions we hear it shortly. So we then hear, take your son, your favorite one, right? We're going to hear this later. You're going to take Isaac up the mountain, and you'll hear the narration of this story in our Torah reading later on. And I get to play Abraham, and Pete gets the one line from Isaac, Rabbi Pete. So a slight reversal of generations. But so Abraham is taking Isaac up the mountain. They've arrived and they've left the lads behind. You stay here. The boy and I will go up there. We will worship and return to you. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. And he's taken the firestone and the knife, and the two walked off together. And then we hear, Vayome Yitzchak el Avraham Aviv, that Isaac says to Abraham, his father, Vayomer Avi. He says, Dad, my dad. Vayomer Hineni v'ni. And Abraham responds saying, here I am, my son. Now, this painful moment that we know that is about to unfold is, I think, central. The central turning point is this conversation between Isaac and Abraham. It's only one line, but Isaac says, Dad, and Abraham responds saying, yes, here I am. That's how you respond when you want to be a responsible father who's going to sacrifice his son on a mountain, right? It's a challenging moment. And Isaac says, Hine ha'esh v'heitzim, v'aye haseh le'olah. Isaac says, behold, look, here's the fire, and I'm, carrying the wood, but where is the lamb for the offering? Where is the sheep for the burnt offering? The aye. And I think I'm being probably a little bit suggestive with the language here, because aye is just an interrogative, it's just a form of question. But if we think aye haseh le'olah, ay hevel achika, ayeka, they're all derived from the same Hebrew, meaning where? Where are you? Where is your brother? Where is the sheep for the burnt offering? What's going on? And Abraham's response, notice, in response to his son, not in response to God, when we had in Genesis with the story of creation with Adam and Eve and with Cain and Abel, there's an upturn of the dynamic, whereas God was speaking there. Now it's the generation up talking up to Abraham. And Abraham says, Elohim yir'eh haseh le'olah. God will see to this, the lamb for the burnt offering, B'ni, my son. V'yelechu shnehem yachdav. That's the only interaction they have for the whole only conversation they have for the whole of this story. All Isaac has heard is, Hineni, here I am, son, and don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. What can go wrong? For Isaac, the trauma is unbelievably painful, I think, at this point in the Torah. And in fact, Abraham and Isaac never speak again. There's no scene in which Abraham and Isaac are in the Torah again, except when Isaac is burying his father. So the trauma we feel persists as they're going through. And all he has heard is that religious response to what happens when you're called to take responsibility that Abraham has used once. It's like he's testing out how he should be responding as a devoted, faithful individual. Hineni v'ni, here I am, my son. So then we go down a little bit further. Isaac has been laid upon the altar, laid out the wood, is bound. Isaac's bound on the altar, and we hear V'yikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim v'yomer Avraham. There's more urgency here. An angel of the Eternal One calls out from heaven and says, Abraham, Abraham. V'yomer, and Abraham responds, Hineni. So now Isaac has heard the word twice, Hineni. Hineni, here I am. And then the unraveling of this moment happens when now I know that, don't raise your arm against the boy or do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God. You have not withheld your son from me. And then Abraham turns and sees the ram and is able to sacrifice it. So Abraham, we feel a little bit like, is testing out the language of responsibility here and doesn't quite get it right. There's a wonderful story about this moment where the angel of God calls out that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel tells about his worry that he says to his father, who was also, I think his father was also a rabbi, he was certainly from a Hasidic dynasty. He says to his father, what if the angel of God is late? Right? Abraham is poised with the knife. What if the angel of God is late? And his father says, the angel of God is never late. But that anxiety there of what if this all goes terribly wrong? And in truth, in certain respects, the familial relationship has gone wrong. And it's all hinged around the word Hineni. So now look what happens as we work through. We need to get through these sources. And so Rashi gives a comment of Hineni, Rashi is in the 11th century. Rashi's response is, Hineni kachi aniatam shel chasidim. This is the answer of the pious, an expression of meekness or of humility and readiness. Ulashon zimun. Here I am here. I'm not sure Isaac would have perceived it that way somehow. So now we're going to move on. Next generation after Abraham, Isaac. So Isaac was old, his eyes were too dim to see. Right? We have a wonderful moment. He calls his older son Esau and says to him, my son. Now, where have we heard that before? Isaac heard, Avi, Hineni bani, here I am, my son. right? Abraham and Isaac have said that. So he calls their son, he says, he says, Beni v'yomer elav hineni. He says, my son. And Esau answers, here I am. One of the really challenging aspects of Esau's character is he's not setting out to be the bad guy. And the rabbis portray him very negatively because Esau becomes, in some senses, in the Midrashim later on in the late antiquity, in the turn of the Common Era, becomes synonymous with Rome. But in the story itself, Esau is this, he's always trying to do the right thing. He wants to make his father happy. He wants to get the best food for his father. He wants to honor his birthright as much as he can. Or to get the blessing as much as he can. He sold his birthright. So he says, how do you respond when you're called to take responsibility from God or from your father? You say, Hineni. So he's doing all of the right things. Isaac is now saying, I'm old, I don't know when I'm going to die. So now can you go and prepare a dish for me to eat and I can give you my blessing? Well, in comes Rebecca, who's been listening, and she and Jacob work out a way to steal the blessing from Esau, from right under Esau's nose, and in fact from underneath Isaac's nose, because of course he's blind. They play on his visual impairment, and so we then hear the trickery has happened. Now look, Esau has said Hineni at the start, trying to be the responsible adult, the faithful individual, and then the trickery has occurred, and then all the way at the end, Vayavo el Aviv, right, this is verse 18. Jacob is now in the moment of deception. Vayavo el Aviv, Vayomer Avi. He goes into his father's, to his father's bedside. He says, my dad, Avi. Now, how do you respond when you're Isaac and you hear your son saying, Avi, binding of Isaac, Avi, Hineni v'ni, here I am, my son, right? Abraham has already modeled this for him. So he goes into Jacob has gone into Isaac's bed and says, my dad, Vayomer. And Isaac says, Hineni, mi ata bani, which of my sons are you? Hineni, here I am. Now, who are you? Notice the question. Isaac is doing everything that he can to be the right, he's modeling after his father how to respond to Hineni. And here it is all going to go well. It's going to go right for Jacob eventually, but the deception is now about to happen. Vayomer Yaakov el Aviv, and Jacob says to his father, Anochi Esav b'chorecha, I am Esau, your firstborn. Asiti ka'asher dibarti elai. Come on, do what you said you were going to do. I mean, this is not the respectful young man who should have been, think of Esau. Esau says, Hineni. Jacob says, I am your Esau, your firstborn. Now do what you said you were going to do and give me your blessing. Sit up, eat my game, that you may give me your innermost blessing. So there's a challenge here. Isaac is often in the stories of the book of Genesis, this character who sits between the generations in this really painful way. The trauma of the Akedah sits with him, and the deception of his son also sits with him. We feel like he's often acted upon, but actually, I think he has great resilience and great strength, that he sustains his family the way that he does. I mean, in spite of the fact that his role model of his parent was, quite challenging in many respects, the events that happened to him. So this is Isaac's experience of Hineni. Notice he only says it once. Isaac only says it once. Esau has said it, and now he's thinking, he's behaving as you should when you want to be in the moment, zimun, present. But who are you, my son? And then the deception happens. So now we carry on, because Jacob now has to unpick some of his deception, some of his trickery. So Jacob, Israel, as he's now known, sets out with all he was his. He came to Beersheba. Remember, who comes to Beersheba? It's Abraham at the end of Akedat Yitzchak. Abraham is going to be at Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. Okay, now we get Vayomer Elohim leYisrael b'marot halayla, Vayomer Yaakov, Yaakov. So God called to Israel in a vision by night and says, Jacob, Jacob, not Israel, Jacob, Jacob, Vayomer Hineni. And he said, Jacob says, here I am. And then God responds and says, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I'll make you there a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will bring you back. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. Now, for me, notice God is still calling Jacob, Jacob, not Israel. At this point, this is in some ways the final test of Jacob's resolution, of Jacob's, the way that Jacob has finally found his place as a patriarch is to be able to stand in place and say, Hineni, here I am. Because until this point, there's some confusion over, or difficulty both with his role and also what's happened to his children, right? Don't have a favorite child, basically. The Bible is telling us all the way through Genesis. And when Jacob manages it, it all goes wrong, but it's all part of the plan. And so eventually he will be down in Egypt, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. And there we have really the three patriarchs all encountering the word Hineni. So I'm going to pause and see if anyone has raised their hand, wants to say anything, wants to ask any questions. Let's get through our last couple of texts then on Hineni, which will hopefully prepare you for Ayeka later on with the shofar service. So we'll skip the Rashi for now. Now we get Moses, right? We heard it 3 times from Abraham. Now we're getting to Moses. Moses tending the flock of his father-in-law, and the priest of Midian drove the flock into the wilderness, right? The burning bush. An angel of the Eternal appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was a bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. The hasne enenu ukwal. And so Moses says, I need to turn aside to look at the marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? And Vayar Adonai kisar lirot vayikra elav Elohim mitoch hasne vayomer Moshe, Moshe. So Moses turns aside. When God sees that he turns aside to look, he calls out to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, Moshe, Moshe. And he responds, Hineni, here I am. The response to being present, to being zimun, to being here, to take your stand, to take responsibility, that we've been seeing being tested out in the first book of the Torah, in the book of Genesis with the patriarchs, is now coming to a sense of being fixed or certain in terms of its purpose and its place within the religious world, or a religious understanding of what it means to take responsibility. Hineni, here I am. Moses is now going to get his call to responsibility. Do not come closer, remove your sandals, and so on. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Now notice here, we've got the reminder that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have already been in this position of being in a relationship with God in a covenantal place of responsibility. Now the Midrashim use some interesting elements in here. God called unto him from the midst of the thorn bush and said, Moses, Moses. He said, here I am. The Holy One said to him, now this is the Midrash speaking, a much later text in the Bible. You have said, God says to him, you have said, here I am. By your life, the hour will come when you will say a prayer over Israel, and I will immediately answer you with these words. It is so stated in Isaiah 58:9. Then when you call, the Eternal shall answer. When you cry for help, he shall say, here I am. Now, the reason I include this Midrash is because in the story of Genesis, in the story of the Exodus, with Moses saying, Hineni, we're reminded of, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses is doing what has become now the response to responsibility, to call to responsibility, to the question of God. But now the Midrash is going to cast us forwards. So now Moses becomes a pivot around which we have history and the future as well. Hineni, the way that we respond to God's call. So we're going to I'm going to skip the other midrash draws us back to Abraham. Notice Abraham has said, "Here I am," and now you are saying, "Here am I." But now Isaiah. This is the first Isaiah. This is Isaiah's vision. Isaiah is being called. Let's just see Isaiah. Isaiah being called to his position. He doesn't really want it. All good prophets don't want their responsibility. All good prophets are not responsibility. They're all scared of the heavy burden of what it means to bring God's vision to the people. And most prophets start with failure. And Isaiah is no fool. He knows things are going to go a bit be challenging. And God, the seraph flew and touched him with the coal on his lips. And then we get in verse 8, then I heard the voice of my Lord saying, whom shall I send? Mi elech lanu. Who will go for us? And I said, Hineni shalacheni. Here I am, send me. Right. Isaiah, having had this mystical vision, now understands that when God says, who shall I send? Who will go for us? That to be the prophet, to be a leader, to take responsibility is to respond Hineni. So Isaiah now falling into that long chain of tradition. But now look what happens. Remember our Midrash text, the Tanchuma, that said that Moses saying Hineni, because Moses responded, here I am, immediately when God called to him out of the burning bush. The Midrash Tanchuma said, well, that's going to happen again in the future, but the roles will be reversed. God has not yet said this. But now look, Isaiah 58, and this is where we're going to finish, because Isaiah 58 is, of course, the text that we're going to read for our Haftarah in 10 days' time on Yom Kippur. Is such the fast I desire, a day for men to starve their bodies? Is it bowing their head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast day, a day when the eternal is favorable? No, right? Isaiah, this is Tutro Isaiah saying, don't be slavishly observant in your religious practice if then when you go and act like a human being outside, you're being anything less than righteous and just. The things have to be matched up. The fast I desire is to unlock fetters of wickedness, untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke, to share your bread with the hungry, take the wretched poor into your home, when you see the naked to clothe him, and not to ignore your own kin. And then we get this wonderful reminder of all of those stories of the patriarchs and of Moses. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn, and your healing spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall march before you. The presence of the eternal shall be your rear guard. And then we get Az tikra va'adonai ya'aneh teshava vayomer hineni. So then when you call, the eternal will answer. When you cry to Shavah, quite a painful cry, the eternal will say, he will say, here I am. So the redemptive call, the call in pain for redemption is going to be responded to with Hineni, but only when we've done all of these things. Right? When we've said Hineni, when we've stood and taken responsibility for our behavior, when we've stood in the covenantal position with God, when we've said Hineni, Zimun, when we're present and fixed in our certainty for our responsibility for the job at hand to make the world a place where the oppressed go free, where bread is shared with the hungry, where the wretched poor are brought into our home, when we see the naked to clothe them. When all of those things are in place, then redemption can come and the role will be reversed. No longer will we be saying Hineni, but God will say Hineni in response to our cry. And so here we find a chain of connection between our Torah portion for this morning, the shofar service that Rabbi Pete developed for us, which is a beautiful service that draws on the question of Ayeka, when we hear God's question, all the way to the Haftarah for Yom Kippur in a few days' time. I hope you've enjoyed some of this learning. I hope you've taken some of the sense of what Hineni can mean for you into your day-to-day lives, and also it will provide meaning for the rest of our Rosh Hashanah service. I'm going to stop sharing now and pass over to whoever is going to be leading the turning on the meditative service. Thank you very much, and Shana Tova.
Shana Tova to you all. I'm Rabbi Rachel Benjamin from Mosaic Liberal Synagogue, and this is Esther Arensfeld, also from Mosaic Liberal. The last year has been a particularly challenging one, especially over the past 6 or 7 months, in ways that most of us wouldn't even imagined a year ago. We wanted to create a space for people to have some quiet, reflective moments before we go into our Rosh Hashanah morning service. This meditative session has been created by Esther, and she will guide us through it. We will begin with a nigun, a familiar tune, to help still our minds and calm our spirits. Lai 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 ya lai 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 la 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 lai ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 ya lai 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 lai.
When Adam and Eve hid behind the bushes after eating the forbidden fruit, God called out, "Ayeka, where are you?" But this was no ordinary game of hide and seek, because God knew exactly where they were. The question was, did they? This is the time of year in the Jewish calendar when we too are called to answer that same question, Ayeka, where are you? COVID-19 and the lockdown restrictions have been challenging for all of us, but they have also given us a time to reflect where we are in our life and what we might want to do differently once things ease up in order to live a more harmonious, balanced, and fulfilling life. So in this special time together, I'm going to take us through a guided meditation based around the Jewish calendar to help us see what we've been up to over the past 12 months and what changes we'd like to make so that the new year can have real meaning for us. But first, get comfy in your seat. Let your hands rest gently in your lap. Feel your feet firmly planted on the ground. And if you're comfortable, gently close your eyes. Now take a couple of deep breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you breathe out any stress or tension that you might be feeling. Just breathe it out. And again, breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And let the breath now find its natural rhythm. Feel your body fully supported by your chair or sofa. And just notice how it is to be in your body at this time. If you notice any tension, gently breathe it out. Allow your mind to become still, simply by focusing on your breath, observing the cool air as it flows in through your nostrils, and the warm air in front of you as you breathe out. And now, as you breathe in, feel your heart gently open to receive the love of God, or whatever name you use for the source of life. As you prepare now to reflect on the past year. And as we step into the High Holy Day period, cast your mind back over the past 12 months. What were some of the highlights? And going back now to October and Sukkot, the Autumn Harvest Festival, a time to give thanks for what we've harvested in our life. As you reflect on the past year, what were the things and people that you are most thankful for? In autumn, the trees start changing their colors, and the whole of nature starts changing to make way for winter. Think about the changes that you yourself have made this year, and which ones are you most proud of? At the darkest time of year, we celebrated Hanukkah, the holiday of light and miracles. What miracles or surprising events happened in your life this year? Moving on to January, we had Tu B'Shvat, the birthday of trees, and a time for planting new seeds and new ideas. What new things did you start this year? Between late February and March came Purim, the festival of fun and revelry. Have you managed to have fun in your life? Bring to mind some of those fun times. And if you didn't, what stopped you? In March, we all went into lockdown and had to completely rethink our lives. For some, this meant great personal and financial hardship. It also coincided with Pesach, when we recall our ancestors' struggles and hardship. As you reflect over these past 6 months, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you deal with them? Lockdown also gave us time to reflect on the people that we've had some difficulty with. Is there anyone that you still need to make peace with, or maybe just let go of, to feel lighter in your heart? Moving into June, we celebrated Shavuot and the gift of Torah. We are all blessed with unique gifts, unique skills and qualities which we are called to use. What are your special skills and qualities, and how have you used them this year? And finally, with Rosh Hashanah, the new year upon us, what do you want to do differently in the coming year to help you lead a more balanced and fulfilling life? And now, bring your attention back into the room. Feel your body on your seat, your feet on the floor, and gently open your eyes. Now, you may wish to reflect further on some of these questions because, as Plato said, a life that is not examined is not worth living. And it's only when we have evaluated where we have been and where we would like to be that we can hope to enter the new year with a new heart, lev chadash, and a new soul, ruach chadasha, shana tova.
Thank you, Esther. Lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai.
Boker Tov, good morning, Shana Tova. We still have a few minutes before our service is due to start, but while we're still waiting for everybody to join us, I just want to begin by welcoming everybody who's already made it into the room. We are going to start. It's about 2 minutes to 11. We're due to start at 11 o'clock, but Jewish meantime and all that will even though perhaps, as I said last night, the traffic might not be holding everybody up, the traffic at least coming into the room is holding people up. So we're going to give people another few minutes just to join us, but we will start in the next few minutes. No, I was just going to say, Pete, that we could begin to introduce ourselves and the rabbinic team that we've got here today while we wait for everybody to come in. I'm Rabbi Charlie Baginski of SBJC, South Bucks Jewish Community, and of Liberal Judaism. And as you can see, I'm really lucky this morning to be joined side by side, socially distanced, of course, with the wonderful Rabbi Pete Tobias. Pete?
It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm Rabbi Pete Tobias. I am a guest in Rabbi Charlie's home. I'm also the rabbi of the Liberal Synagogue, Elstree, and it was a real honor to be here. I did a Erev Rosh Hashanah service last night, all on my own in a very empty shul, and it felt very, quite sad actually, but I am quite a sad person, as those of you who know me know. But it was then suggested that in order to minimize that, or possibly make me even sadder, I should come and share this morning with Charlie. But so far it hasn't done that at all. It's a joy to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
And the honey cake.
And the honey cake, that I'm not allowed to mention because I'm on a diet.
And so we're what we colloquially have called ourselves the rabbinic merry-go-round, and that means that wonderfully we are working in a rabbinical team, a really great rabbinical team, and we're joined this morning by Rabbi Rachel Benjamin.
She is waving.
Yes, good morning everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova. So I'm Rabbi Rachel Benjamin and from Mosaic Liberal Synagogue.
Good morning, Rachel. And
Hi, Charlie.
It's also delightful that the fourth member of our team is the wonderful Rabbi Neil James. Good morning, Neil.
Morning. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova. And I will be joining in November, SBJC. But for now, I'm just really thrilled that we're all together, these four communities. It's brilliant. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you, Neil. And I know that SBJC are really excited that you're going to be joining them shortly. And I know that Liberal Judaism, we are delighted to welcome you back into the fold. A real sweet start to the new year, and a sweet start to the new year. We are going to begin our service. We are going to be using the Machzor, which you can find either in your homes on your bookshelf or on the Liberal Judaism website under the resources for High Holidays at Home. So if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, or indeed Zoom in the room, then please go to the website if you want to find the text to follow along. And all of us will try and make sure that we give you as many page numbers as possible. A couple of other pieces of housekeeping, it happens even when we're in our homes rather than in our buildings, is to say that we are, those of you that are on Zoom, we are broadcasting out to YouTube and to Facebook on both the synagogue's Facebook pages, but also on Liberal Judaism's. So if you are uncomfortable with being on screen, then please feel free to turn off your video. Additionally, any of those of you who are lucky enough to be able to unmute yourselves because you are reading during the service, please, if you could make sure that you are muted the rest of the time, that would be really, really wonderful. Just enables us to be able to hear the beautiful singing that we're going to have as part of the service. And the last piece of housekeeping is that although I know that you love the four of us as rabbis very dearly and are always wait until this part of the year to hear long and intricate sermons from us, we aren't going to this morning have 4 sermons. Rather, you can find sermons from all 4 of us on the Liberal Judaism website, where we have already put up all 4 sermons, so you can treat yourself to that over a number of days, or all after the service, feel free to have a stream run of four sermons.
Just to say that I have a sneaky feeling mine's not there yet because it was only recorded at 3:10 a.m. this morning, but it will be there soon, I promise. So the other 3 are much better anyway.
The problem with having Pete actually next to me rather than on a computer is I don't have the power to mute him. So hopefully we will enjoy the following service, which begins on page 94. On page 94 with Ma Tov. And we're on page 97, on page 97. Praise be the one at whose command the world came to be. We praise the one whose word is deed, whose will is done. We praise the one who has mercy on the earth and its inhabitants. We praise the one who dispels darkness and brings on light. We praise the living and eternal God. We praise the saving and redeeming God. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamahulal b'fi amo, meshubah mufa'ah b'lshon chasidav v'avadav, b'shvechot u'bizmirot, negadelcha v'namlichecha, malkeinu yachid, hei haolamim. Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal b'tishbachot.
We continue on page 103 with Hamelech HaYoshev.
Joseph needs to be made co-host for this, whoever the host is. I've sent a message.
This is the delight, of course, of our wonderful technology, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But we are on page 103, and hopefully in just a moment, Joseph Finley from Mosaic Liberal Synagogue is going to lead us in Hamelech Yoshev.
המלך יושב על כיסא רם ונישא, שוכן עד מרום וקדוש שמו, בפי שרים תתרומם ובדברי צדיקים תתפרע, ובלשון חסידים תתקדש, ובקרב קדושים תתחלף. And I believe we are going straight on to the Baruch Hu on page 104. Baruch Hu Adonai Hamavorach, Baruch Adonai Hamavorach, Leolam Vaed.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzei ha'or uborei choshech, osei shalom uborei et hakol, hamei la'aretz v'ladarim aleha borachamim, uv'tuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh b'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mala ha'aretz kinanecha, titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, Ba'al morei or she'asita, ya'afru chasela, Baruch atah Adonai, yotzei hamorot. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. And on the bottom of page 105, we come to the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol moedecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher nochim et tzavacha hayom al levavecha. V'shenantam levanecha v'debarta bam. V'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech. V'v'shochbecha v'kumecha. V'kshatam liot al yadecha. V'hayu letotafot beinenecha. U'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'vish arecha.
Laman tisgaru ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
True and beautiful and good. Sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נעתה בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל, גאל ישראל, Israel.
We continue our service with the tefillah, which can be followed on page 109, page 109. Adonai sefetai tiftach ufia kitehilatecha. Adonai sefetai tiftach ufia kitehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el hagadol hagibor v'hanora El Elyon, gomer chasadim tovim ve'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot ve'imahot, u'mevi geula livnei v'neihem, lema'an shemo be'ahava.
זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ מים, וכותבנו בספר חיים. למען האלוהים חיים.
מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye meitim ata rav lo hoshia, mashiv haruach hamorid hageshem, mazriach hashemesh, umorid hatal.
1, 2,
Mi chamocha av harachamim, zoche yitzurav lechayim berachamim. Who is like you, source of mercy? In your mercy you remember your creatures and grant them life. V'ne'eman ata lehachayot meitim, baruch ata Adonai, mechayeh hameitim. Na'aritzecha v'nakdishecha, kesod siach sarfei kodesh hamakdishim shimcha b'kodesh, kakatuv al yad neviyecha, v'kara zeh el zeh ve'amar.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Meloch ol haaretz kavodo.
Adonai Adonenu, ma'adir shimcha b'chol haaretz.
Baruch kavod Adonai mimekomo.
Mimkomo hu yifen barachamim, v'yachon am hamiyachadim shemo erev v'voker b'chol yom tamid, pa'amayim be'ahava, shma omrim.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu, hu Malkeinu, hu Moshienu, v'hu Yashmi'enu berachamav shenit, le'enei kol chai.
Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Uvdivrei kodeshecha katuv le'mor.
Imloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion ledor vador. Hallelujah, Hallelujah.
L'dor vador nagid godlecha, u'lenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish. B'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed. We continue in the middle of page 112, the continuation of our Kedusha. And so, Eternal One, our God, inspire all your works to be in awe before you, and let all creatures tremble at your presence. Let all life revere you and all creation turn to you in worship. Let all become a single fellowship to do your will with a perfect heart. For well we know, eternal God, that yours is the majesty, yours the might, and awesome is your name in all creation. And so, eternal God, grant honor to your people, glory to those who revere you, hope to those who seek you, and courage to those who trust you. Fill your land with gladness and your city with joy, and cause the light of redemption to dawn for all humanity. And then the just shall see and rejoice. The upright be glad, and the faithful sing for joy. Violence shall rage no more, and evil shall vanish like smoke. The rule of tyranny shall pass away from the earth, and you alone, eternal God, shall have dominion over all that you have made. Kadosh ata v'nova shemecha, ve'ein Eloah mibaladecha. You are holy, awesome is your name. There is no God but you, as it is written.
And we continue in the middle of page 113. Our God and God of our ancestors, may you rule in glory over all the earth, and let your grandeur be acclaimed throughout the world. Reveal the splendor of your majesty to all who dwell on earth, that all your works may know you as their maker, and all the living acknowledge you as their creator. Then all who breathe shall say, the Eternal One, the God of Israel, is sovereign, ruling over all creation. You have given us a special task among the peoples. In your love and favor, you have sanctified us by your commandments, drawn us near to your service, and charged us to make known your great and holy name. In your love, Eternal One, our God, you have given us this Sabbath day and this day of remembrance, a day of sounding the shofar, a sacred assembly in remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. And at the foot of page 114, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, ya'aleh v'yavo v'yizacher zichronenu v'zichron kol amcha beit Yisrael lefanecha, letova v'livracha, lechaim u'leshalom, b'yom hazikaron hazeh. Zochreinu Adonai Eloheinu bo letova. Remember us this day for well-being.
Amen.
Ufokdeinu vo livracha. Bless us this day with your presence.
Amen.
V'hoshienu vo lechaim. Grant us this day continued life.
Amen.
According to your promise, be gracious and compassionate to us and redeem us. To you do we look, for you are a gracious and compassionate God and sovereign. And for the remaining prayers of the Amidah, we're just going to read the Chatimot, the closing blessings of those prayers. So in the middle of page 115, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech al kol haaretz, Makadesh ha-Shabbat v'Yisrael v'Yom hazikaron. We praise you, O God, sovereign of all the world. You hallow the Sabbath, the house of Israel, and the day of remembrance. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha v'yir'ah na'avod. We praise you, O God, whom alone we worship in reverence. In the middle of page 116. Uchtov lechaim tovim kol b'nei v'ritecha. May all who are loyal to your covenant be inscribed for a good life. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulacha na'eh lehodot. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, baruchenu b'bracha hameshuleshet hakatuva b'Torah. Yevarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha b'chuneka.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
Amen. Ken Yehi Ratzon.
And in the middle of page 117. V'sefer chaim uvracha nikatev lechaim tovim u'leshalom. May we be inscribed in the book of life and blessing for a life of goodness and peace. Baruch atah Adonai, Osei Hashalom. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. And we take a few moments now for silent meditation, either to read the readings on pages 117 and 118, or just to be alone and quiet with our own thoughts and prayers.
We continue now on page 119 as we make our way towards our Torah service. Avinu Malkeinu, our Creator and Sovereign. As we contemplate the arks in our respective synagogues, the memory of the scrolls confronts us with challenge and fills us with hope. Their very sight raises echoes from our past, poses questions about our present, and holds out promise for our future. 100 generations have stood where we stand now on this day of judgment. Searching their souls and their deeds, they found little merit. They trembled to face the sovereign of all creation. But we are children of a time that has sought to dethrone you. We have witnessed the power of mortals to create and to worship the work of their own hands. Strange then to see the emptiness your absence has brought upon us. Strange that the agonies of our time grow more numerous and more intense, the more our worship centers on ourselves. Strange that we grow smaller without you, smaller without our ancestors' humble faith. Scarcely do we tremble before you, Oh, would we tremble at ourselves and our works and at the days to come. May this day, which yet holds us in its spell, bring us back to you. May this season teach us that you are with us whenever we open ourselves to your presence. May this service impress on us that you are absent only when we shut you out, only when we are full of ourselves. On this day, we call upon you by many names. We search for you in all your manifestations. We call you Shekhinah and seek your divine presence. We call you Makor Chayenu, the source of our lives, and find renewal in returning to you. We call you Avinu. As a loving parent, forgive our many sins and failings and receive us back. We call you Malkeinu. As a wise ruler, command us to obey you and do not judge us too severely when we are unheeding. Let love and power be united in our world. To this dream, this possibility, this task, let us give ourselves anew. Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha, our Creator and Sovereign, we have sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata. Our Creator and Sovereign, we have no sovereign but you. Avinu Malkeinu Achazirenu B'Teshuvah Shelema Lefanecha. Our Creator and Sovereign, bring us back to you in perfect repentance. Avinu Malkeinu Salach Umachal Lechol Avonotenu. Our Creator and Sovereign, pardon and forgive all our wrongdoing. Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu V'al Aleinu V'Tzapenu. Our Creator and Sovereign, have compassion on us and on our children. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Deve V'Cherev V'Ra'av Me Aleinu. Our Creator and Sovereign, help us to conquer sickness, war and famine. Avinu Malkeinu Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Our Creator and Sovereign, may we be inscribed for blessing in the book of life. Avinu Malkeinu Kotvenu B'Sefer Parnasah V'Chalkala. Our Creator and Sovereign, bless us with prosperity and well-being. Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Our Creator and Sovereign, let the new year be for us a good year. Avinu Malkeinu Harem Keren Yisrael Amecha. Our Creator and Sovereign, give strength to your people Israel. Avinu Malkeinu Hatzmach Lanu Yeshua B'Karov. Our Creator and Sovereign, help us to hasten the time of redemption. Avinu Malkeinu Kabel Barachamim Uveratzon Et Tefilatenu. Our Creator and Sovereign, accept our prayer with favor and mercy. Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Va'anenu Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim. Aseh Imanu Tzedaka V'Chesed V'Hoshi'enu. Our Creator and Sovereign, be gracious to us and answer us, for there is little merit in us. Treat us with charity and kindness, and be our help. So welcome to our Torah service that you come to. This is a unique moment where the four rabbis to whom you were introduced before and whom you've now all seen on your screens this morning combined together to organize a very special and indeed unique reading of the Torah. Just to remind you who the four of us are, we have, and the reason we're called the Rabbinic Merry-Go-Round actually is that, not going into too lengthy a story, but we began about 3 months ago, owing to various people's plans to leave the country. Different rabbis were assigned to different communities, and then that person's plans to leave the country were ruined by COVID, and so everybody suddenly went back to where they started. So we all got back on the merry-go-round, span it around, and now we've ended up with me representing the Elstree, the Liberal Synagogue Elstree, Rabbi Baginski to my right with South Bucks Jewish community, which actually she was always connected to. Rabbi Neil Janes is looking after the Stevenage Liberal congregation, and Rabbi Rachel Benjamin is with Mosaic Liberal. And so really everybody is kind of back where they belong. And we've managed to get together, regardless of which synagogues we happen to be representing. We are put together an account or a reading of the story of the Akedah directly from the Torah, but rather than having it read just by one of us and translated, it's been portrayed as a drama, which it's meant to be. It is actually a real drama of a story. The whole thing would have been relayed to our ancient ancestors, and there are several lines in it that would clearly have had everybody right on the edge of their seats. I mean, if it were a modern day soap opera, then a number of occasions when the line comes where we're told that Abraham gets the fire and the wood and he puts it on Isaac, and then suddenly it's a sort of EastEnders moment, and then it says, Vayelchu shnehem yachdav, and the two of them went on together. So they're really building up to the drama, and I think we maybe missed some of that in the way that we read the Torah. But there's a bigger element to the Akedah. It's not just the story of what happened or didn't quite happen to Isaac. There are a lot of other characters in the story who aren't actually in the story. And most notably, of course, is Sarah, who waits at home, knowing that her husband has taken her son off somewhere. He's been probably a bit mysterious about the whole thing. He's hardly likely to say, just off to sacrifice Isaac, love, I'll be back in 6 days. So clearly there's something going on, and Sarah must have picked up the vibe. So she's bound to be very anxious, waiting at home to find out what on earth is going on with her husband and their only son, who after all only entered their lives when they were in their 90s. So there's a lot of drama underpinning the story. And in the Akedah project, which Rabbi Charlie mentioned at the beginning, we've invited members of Liberal Judaism to contribute to this with their suggestions and their ideas of how we might represent Sarah's feelings as part of the story. So we're going to hear the story. We're going to hear a song behind the story which talks about Sarah's agony. The song is actually called
Across the River. It's
Across
by
the
Girls
River
in Trouble.
by Girls in Trouble.
It's credited on the track.
It's in there.
River So Wide.
River So Wide. Thank you, Rachel.
See, this is
Thank
why we
you.
need 4 of us, okay? We can't manage this on our own.
We're a team.
And so we're coming up to the story, and there are a couple of other little elements to it as well, which I won't spend too much time introducing because you'd probably rather listen to them than to me. So it just remains for me to call up the person to read this morning's blessings. Ya'amod Michael ben Yezuka Likriyat HaTorah.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMavorach, Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Li'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים נישא את אברהם, ויאמר אליו,
אברהם.
ויאמר,
הנני,
ויאמר,
קח נא את בנך, את יחידך, אשר אהבת, את יצחק, ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה, והעלהו שם לעולה, על אחד ההרים אשר אומר אליך.
To the river so wide, Satan was standing on the other side. He said to me, look and see, I saw you with our only child, with a knife in your hand and your eyes so wild, on the mountaintop. And then the vision stopped.
וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויחבוש את חמורו, ויקח את שני נעריו איתו, ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עצי עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ביום השלישי, ויישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו,
שבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני והנער נלכה עד כה, ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם.
ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה, וישם על יצחק בנו. ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו.
Taken my only son, some terrible place where I can't see his face. All these years I've been a faithful wife, and I gave you a child so late in my life. My time was done when I bore you a son.
ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר,
אבי?
ויאמר,
הנני בני,
ויאמר,
הנה האש והעצים ואיה השה לעולה.
ויאמר אברהם,
אלוהים יראה לו השה לעולה בני.
וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויבואו אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ויבן שם אברהם את המזבח. ויערוך את העצים. ויעקוד את יצחק בנו. וישם אותו על המזבח ממעל העצים. וישלח אברהם את ידו, ויקח את המאכלת לשחוט את בנו.
Dark inside my head, and I don't care if I never do wake up, if I can't be with the one I love.
ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר,
אברהם, אברהם.
ויאמר,
הנני.
ויאמר,
אל תשלח ידך אל הנאה, ואל תעש לו מאומה. כי אתה ידעתי, כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא הסחת את בנך, את יחידך ממני.
וישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא, והנה איל אחר נאחז בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם, ויקח את האיל, ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא, אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום, בהר אדוני יראה. ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית מן השמיים, ויאמר,
בי נשבעתי נאום אדוני, כי יען אשר עשית את הדבר הזה, ולא הסחת את בנך, את יחידך. כי יברך אברכך, והרבה הרבה את זרעך, ככוכבי השמיים, וככל אשר על שפת הים. וירש זרעך את שאר אויביו, והתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי.
וישוב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע. וישב אברהם בבאר שבע.
Well, I went down to the river so wide. Satan was standing on the other side. He said to me, look and see. But hush, little baby, don't you cry, 'cause I'll be waiting on the other side. You won't be alone. I'll make it feel like home.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nota b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. And before we continue with the Haftarah, we're going to interpolate at this point Shekhinah Makor Chayenu, the prayer which you'll find on page 137. Page 137. Shekhinah Makor Chayenu, Hastirinu B'chanfei Rachamai. Divine presence, source of our lives, shelter us under the wings of your compassion. Shekhinah Makor Chayenu Holichinu B'drachayich, Darchei Chesed V'Rachamim. Divine presence, source of our lives, cause us to walk in your ways of love and compassion. Shekhinah Makor Chayenu, Chazki et Yitzreinu Hatov, L'ma'an Nitgaber, Al Yitzreinu Hara. Divine presence, source of our lives, fortify our desire to do good, that we may overcome our tendency to do evil. Shekhinah Makor Chayenu, Amtsinu Lahachnia et Ka'asenu, Ulahishtalet al Tokfanutenu. Divine presence, source of our lives, give us strength to restrain our anger and to control our aggression. Shechina makor chayenu lamdinu et ma'aneh harach hameshiv chema. Divine presence, source of our lives, teach us to use the gentle answer that turns away wrath. Acharit v'tikva, a future and a hope. And as we now come to our Haftarah reading, the blessings are on page 129 in the book if you wish to follow them. Isaiah chapter 55 verses 6 to 13 contains perhaps one of the more iconic lines of the Nevi'im of the Hebrew Bible. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways, says the Eternal One. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So as we recognize that there is a huge gap in the end between our puny, humble effort to understand God and the power of the universe that exists above, beyond, and perhaps within us too, this Haftarah encapsulates that and encourages us at the same time as acknowledging that, also to recognize that we can gain a closeness to God. Haftarah, Isaiah chapter 55, verses 6 to 13, page 129.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacha b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'torah uv'moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'nvi'ei ha'emet b'tzedek.
Seek the Eternal One at a favorable time. Call out while God is near. Let the wicked forsake their ways, and those bent on evil their thoughts. Let them return to the Eternal One, who will show them mercy, and to our God, who will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways, says the Eternal One. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And as rain and snow come down from heaven and do not return until they have watered the earth, making it blossom and bear fruit, giving people seed to sow and bread to eat, so shall the word which comes from my mouth prevail. It shall not return to me empty, without having accomplished its purpose or succeeded in its mission. You shall then go out with joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills shall burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Fir trees will grow instead of thorns, myrtles instead of briars. So shall God's name be established, a sign forever, it shall not perish.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol ha'olamim, Sadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'oseh, ha'medaber u'mekayem, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה ועל יום הזיכרון הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש השבת בישראל ביום הזיכרון. אמן.
And now we continue with some specially composed prayers for the community. We're not reading the traditional prayer for the royal family and so on, but these have been composed for the times in which we're living.
This was the year when the world has been turned on its head, when homes became workplaces and schools and prisons and sanctuaries, when touch became scary and isolation a reality. This was the year when we counted our blessings and counted the days, even when it was not the Omer. This was the year when our heroes were in our hospitals, in our schools, and when leadership was shown by those who continued to empty our bins and fill our supermarket shelves. This was the year when we learned a new vocabulary of furlough and masks, pandemic and shielding. This was the year when we cried out to be together again in person, to kiss at Kiddush and to take for granted a mundane routine. This was the year we recognized how many people had been excluded from our communities in years past by the stumbling blocks we did not know we had erected. And this was the year we flung doors, screens, and webcams open wide to bring them in. This was the year we took our foot off the accelerator and watched how our environment flourished, when we heard the birds sing, the traffic stop, and the skies clear. This was the year when there was tragedy, bereavement, and despair, inequality and suffering, and when we found hope that we can learn and change, even if it is only how to unmute when the time is right. So may God bless Zoom. May God bless us for finding the creativity to keep our congregations open, to say even when we shut the doors of our building, we opened ourselves to each other, that we said no one will find themselves alone, and we will bring prayer and learning into your homes. If you cannot come to us, then we will come to you. May God bless us and all the congregations all over the world, marking this time in all the diverse and wonderful ways they invented and created. Give us all the strength to continue to be brave, to hold on to the knowledge that this too shall pass, and we will be together in person again, and mourn all that we have lost and celebrate all we have learned. May God bless us and keep us, and enter us into the new year with friendship and hope and a newfound gratitude for each other and community. This may be a year of tragedy, but even out of adversity, there is always hope that we can learn, even if it is hard to unmute when the time is right.
So now we continue on page 138. Ki lekach tov.
La musique
And now we move to the shofar service. As was mentioned earlier, this is a special service that has been compiled and put together specifically for the blowing of the shofar. It draws on a song written by a colleague of mine, an American colleague, Rabbi Joe Black. The title of the song is Ayeka, Where Are You? Those of you who took part in Rabbi Neil's study session this morning will have already encountered that word. It was God's question to Adam when Adam was trying to hide from God in the Garden of Eden. And it's also the sound, I think the question that is contained within the sound of the shofar calling to each of us, where are you? And I hope that as we make our way through the service, you'll hear that question as we also listen to the shofar being blown. And many of the readings that are incorporated here were taken from and then adapted from the Gate of Repentance, the previous liberal Jewish mahzor that was produced and published in 1973. So you'll be following this on your screen from now on. You won't find it in the book, but I hope that what's on the screen will enable you to follow what's going on. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall hold a sacred assembly and abstain from all work. You shall mark it by sounding the shofar. In ancient Israel, the sounding of the ram's horn signified various occurrences in the lives of our ancestors. It was a sound of warning and alarm, but in settled times it was used to signify the beginning of a new month and other solemn occasions in the calendar. Because the 7th month was the most important of the year for an agricultural community, the harvest festival of Sukkot falls in just 2 weeks when the moon is full. The start of that month acquired extra significance. As Judaism moved away from its agricultural roots, the new moon of the 7th month became an occasion to commemorate the creation of the world, to recall the binding of Isaac and the covenant at Sinai, to celebrate God's sovereignty over the universe, to warn of God's judgment of all men and women, demanding of them repentance and rededication, and to proclaim the ultimate triumph of good over evil. Uvachodesh hashvi'i ba'echad lachodesh, mikra kodesh yihiyeh lachem, kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu, yom teruah yihiyeh lachem. The shofar calls out to us at this time of year and asks each of us, Ayeka, where are you? It reminds us of the role we can play in perfecting the world and says to us, awake, you sleepers, from your sleep. Arouse yourselves, you slumberers, out of your slumber. Examine your deeds and turn to God in repentance. Remember your Creator, you who, caught up in the daily round, lose sight of eternal truth, who waste your years in vain pursuits which neither benefit nor save. Look closely at yourselves, improve your ways and your deeds. Every one of you give up your evil ways and your unworthy aims. Blow the shofar at the new moon and when the moon is full. For our festival, it is a statute for Israel, an ordinance, of the God of Jacob. We continue with
And we continue now with our blessings for hearing the sound of the shofar. At this point, there are 2 blessings. They're both the blessing for hearing the sound and then the Shehechianu. Please do join with me with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmo'a kol shofar. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe. You sanctify us by your commandments and enjoin us to hear the sound of the shofar. And the Shehechianu we say together, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kiyemanu v'hikianu lazman hazeh.
Tekiah. Shivarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah.
오늘 산을 덕해 그로샷하염 기호노라베아염 우월지나세 말고
For truly, you are judge and arbiter, expert and witness. You write and seal, record and recount. You remember deeds long forgotten. You open the book of records, and what is written there proclaims itself, for it bears the signature of every human being. The great shofar is sounded, the still, small voice is heard, and all who dwell on earth stand arrayed before you.
Uteshova, utefila, usedaka, marim nedro, hagezera.
Rabbah said, Malchuyot Zichronot v'Shofarot. Rabbah said, the Holy One ever to be praised, said, recite before me on Rosh Hashanah passages that speak of Malchuyot, sovereignty, of Zichronot, remembrance, and of Shofarot. Sovereignty so that your remembrance may acknowledge me as ruler over you. Remembrance, so that your remembrance may rise up favorably before me. And by what means shall this be done? By means of the shofar. The three sections of readings that follow encourage us to think of ways that God rules the universe, from the furthest star to the tiniest particle, from distant planets to our every thought and action. How our Jewish history reminds us of our unique relationship with God and of the covenant to which we are committed, charged with the task of helping to bring about God's rule on earth. Each section concludes with the sounding of the shofar, calling us to the sacred task it is our duty to fulfill. Following each set of shofar notes is a verse taken or adapted from the song that we heard mentioned already by Rabbi Joe Black, entitled Ayeka, Where Are You? The word used by God when searching for Adam, a question God asks of us with the ancient sound of the ram's horn.
The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim God's creative work. Divine energy courses through the countless galaxies of suns, singing a hymn of creation. And as all things have their beginning in the Creator, so does God guide and sustain them. Your voice calls to us not from sunsets and mountaintops alone, but even from life's daily routine, when we can suddenly become aware of your presence. Almighty God, you rule your works with compassion and with love. Let us add to their voice of silent adoration our prayer and yearning for you, joining with them to proclaim your sovereignty. Eternal One, our God, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Let us now praise the Sovereign of the universe and proclaim the greatness of its Creator, whose unity it is our mission to make known, whose rule it is our task to make effective. We bow in awe and thanksgiving before the Supreme Sovereign, the Holy One ever to be praised.
Aleinu l'shapeach l'adon hakol, l'tei gdula liyotzeh bereshit, asher som chelkeinu liyached et shemo, v'gor aleinu lahamalik malchuto, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh haShabbat v'Yisrael v'yom hazikaron.
Tekiah. Shivarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah.
Hiding in the leaves behind the garden, cowering with guilt and fear and shame, Adam hides his face in his trembling hands, waiting for God to call his name. And the wind begins to stir, the trees begin to weep. Here comes a guest among the new. God's voice cries out in silence with a whisper on the wind. Adam, God says, where are you? Where are you, Ayeka? Are you hiding from yourself or from your sin? Where are you, Ayeka? The answer to God's question lies within.
God of all lands and ages, we stand at Sinai every day. The ground beneath our feet is holy. The light which shines for us is yours. The world burns with your presence. There have been many moments of revelation in the life of our people when your presence was made known to them. We recall their devotion and their dedication to our ancient faith, lovingly preserved and handed down that we might celebrate it on this day of remembrance. They searched, as do we, for glimpses of your presence, understanding, as must we, the connection with their past and the duty to our future. All this we hear, we remember, when the voice of the shofar, stranger among sounds, calls out to us from our past.
Baruch atah Adonai, Zocher Habrit. We praise you, O God, who remembers the covenant.
Tekiah. Shivarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah.
Walking hand in hand upon the mountain, weighted down by lumber and a knife. Abraham remembers Sarah's laughter, and for a moment he fears for Isaac's life. Then he shudders with the wind and fills his head with faith, struggles with a different point of view. He reaches deep inside to find the handle to the blade. Abraham, God screams, where are you? Where are you, Ayeka? Are you hiding from yourself or from your sin? Where are you, Ayeka? The answer to God's question lies within.
To affirm God is to affirm that history has a purpose. Our role as human beings is to perfect ourselves, to unfold the great potential that, created in God's image, resides in us, to learn to live with our fellow humans in peace and harmony, to build a society of liberty and justice, compassion and love, which shall acknowledge God's sovereignty in word and deed, which shall be God's kingdom. This messianic dream, once dreamt by our prophets, shall not be forgotten. Their vision of a better world shall not grow dim. It has sustained us through the ages, and we refuse to let it go. It is the meaning and purpose of our lives. Come what may, we shall cling to it. And then it shall come to pass that your sons and daughters shall prophesy.
The old shall dream dreams, and the young shall see visions.
Violence shall no more be heard within your land.
Devastation or destruction within your borders.
They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain.
For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God, as the waters cover the sea.
Nation shall not lift up sword against nation.
And never again shall they learn to make war.
But justice shall roll down like waters.
And righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Baruch atah Adonai, shomea kol truat amo Yisrael barachamim.
Tekiah. Shivarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tikia. Tikia. Teruah. Tikia. Tikia Gadola.
Sitting in the synagogue all morning, welcoming another Jewish year, joining in with words, not really listening, thinking where you'd rather be than here. And the clock ticks slowly on, and the service soon will end, and you wonder whether you'll be home by 2. Between the machzor's words and the shofar's haunting notes, God whispers to us all, where are you? Where are you, Ayeka? Are you hiding from yourself or from your sin? Where are you, Ayeka? The answer to God's question lies within.
So we now turn to Psalm 150. It's on page 152 in your Machzors. Hallelujah, 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 el bekadsho, hallelujah, bekira uzo. Hallelujah, big vorata. Hallelujah, karov godlo. Hallelujah, 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 pateka shofar. Hallelujah, benevel v'chino. Hallelujah, b'tov u'machol. Hallelujah, b'minim v'ugav. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, بتسلسل الشمع. هللوه بتسلسل ترى كل خنشمة تهلليا. هللويا 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 Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, may you rule in glory over all the earth, and let your grandeur be acclaimed throughout the world. Reveal the splendor of your majesty to all who dwell on earth, that all your works may know you as their maker, and all the living acknowledge you as their creator. Then all who breathe shall say, the Eternal One, the God of Israel, is sovereign, ruling over all creation. And it has been said, the eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day, the eternal God shall be one and known to be one.
Hallelujah.
As we reach the end of this solemn service, we remember with fondness our loved ones who once shared it with us. Those who have died still live in many ways. Life and death alike are mysteries. We journey through a country dimly seen by the uncertain light of thought and feeling, and death is undiscovered territory, a land without report. Yet as we now remember our loved ones who have died, we do so with hope and faith. They have faded from our sight, but they live within us and will ever live. In God's presence, no good thing can perish. In God's love, all beauty shines forever. And in our communities, we remember today on the occasion of their yahrzeits, Mosaic Liberal, Danny Green, the partner of Eve Porath, and Muriel Millett, the mother of Eve Porath, Minnie Casher, the mother of Derek Casher, and Caroline Lawton, the mother of Marie Capitelli. And for South Bucks Jewish community, we remember Mark Jonathan Pulver, the son of Renee and Arnold Pulver. We also remember today Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG, as she was lovingly known, who died yesterday. US Supreme Court Justice, the second woman ever confirmed to that position, teacher, national icon, lifelong advocate of gender equality, and inspiration to many. And she is mourned across the globe. So we'll take a moment now to hold in our hearts and minds the names we have mentioned and the names of all our loved ones, those who died at this time in years gone by, and those we think of and miss especially at this high holiday season. Knowing that life is precious, may we labor for the coming of the day when no one shall perish through the cruelty or indifference of others. Let all be permitted to savor life's goodness to the full, going then to the grave in ripeness of years, without fear or regret, thankful alike for the gift of life and the blessing of peace. And we recite together the words of the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'la'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal. Shmei d'kudashah barichu. Le'ela le'ela min kol bir chata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol b'nei Adam. Ve'imru amen. May the Most High, source of perfect peace, grant peace to us, to all Israel, and to all humanity. And let us say,
Amen.
Amen. And we're going to conclude now with Adon Olam.
Oh
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shana Tova. And a very big thank you to everyone who's participated in the service, to everyone who worked behind the scenes to make it all possible today. And a very big thank you to Joseph and to Mike for the beautiful music. And a very special thank you to Mike for being our tech person and making sure that everything went so very smoothly. So in a moment, we're going to hand over to Rabbi Pete to lead us in Kiddush, which is on page 450 of the Machzor. But I'll hand over to Charlie, just if there are any announcements, Charlie.
I have no announcements, just to remind you that you can find our sermons or on the Liberal Judaism website, that will be in the individual communities on Kol Nidre, but we'll be back here together on Yom Kippur Day, of which there are things going on all day. I really Shana Tova to everybody and to my colleagues for leading such a beautiful service. And thank you all for being with us. And wonderful to be able to hand over my own house to Rabbi Pete Tobias to lead us in Kiddush.
Wonderful to be here, thank you. So if you have got the book, we're on page 450 and doing edited elements of the Kiddush.
Except we can't see you, Pete. You're out of the picture.
Am I out of the picture?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I'm trying to be short enough to fit into the camera. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'dorotam berit olam, beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim, Asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz ubayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash. Oh, this is Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kasei le'yom chagenu ki chok liYisrael hu mishpat le'Elohei Yaakov. Blow the shofar at the new moon, and when the moon is full for our festival, it is a statute for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari agafen. Amen. L'chaim. Shana Tova. And Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Amen.
I need to get because I've touched it. And finally, back on the previous page, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari ha'etz. These are apple in the honey for a sweet and a happy new year. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. And so for all of those of you watching at home, we're now going to leave the live stream. That's in your hands, Peter. Thank you. And we will see you again on Yom Kippur. Those of you who remain on Zoom can stay, and we will say Shana Tova to each other.
Shana Tova.
That